I just played the Nintendo Switch Lite, which is Nintendo's new game system that's coming out in the fall. I have mixed feelings about it. This is not it. This is the original Nintendo Switch, because I wasn't able to take photos or videos of the Switch Lite. The Switch Lite is $200, so it's $100 less than the Switch, and that's important. It's kind of more of the price of the Nintendo 3DS or the 2DS and all those systems that are out there. But the Switch Lite doesn't have a lot of the features that make the Switch, well, Switch. It doesn't connect to a TV, for instance. It doesn't work with the Switch's dock at all. It doesn't have detachable controllers, so while the Switch has these Joy-Cons that pop out, the Switch Lite, those controllers or the controls are stuck to the body, kind of like a PlayStation Vita or the Nintendo 3DS. The Switch Lite also doesn't have rumble, and I kind of miss that because I like having the rumble feedback when I play games. Some of the games actually really take advantage of that. And the Switch Lite doesn't have a kickstand. Do you use the kickstand? I mean, I do sometimes if I'm playing games with the controller. You can't do that. I feel like the Switch Lite feels a little bit more durable than the slightly flexy feel I get at times with the Switch. And it also has a D-pad here. Instead of these buttons, there's a real full D-pad, which is great if you're playing NES games or other retro games. One of the biggest advantages to the Switch Lite could be battery life. Nintendo says that it should be about 20 to 30% more battery life than the Switch. Now the Switch has about 3 hours or a little less depending on what game you play, so I can't tell where that lands, and in the 20 minutes of gameplay that I had, I certainly wasn't able to test that, but any bit helps. I'd like to try to get to 5 hours. Certainly when the 3DS XL did that, that was a big help for plane flights, so we'll see. There's still a heat vent on the Switch Lite, but it's not as large as the one on the Nintendo Switch. I'm not wild about the vent, and it does sometimes pump out heat. Sometimes it gets a little noisy when playing certain games. I haven't been able to see what the Switch Lite's vent feels like, but it definitely looks less prominent. However, that also leads to the part about the processor. Nintendo says there's a more efficient, but also probably a little less powerful processor on the Switch Lite, which means that while it works fine on the Switch Lite, that's why it can't output those games in 1080p on a TV, which is a shame. And apparently you will not be able to do it at all. Like, don't even try with an adapter. The USB-C port on the Switch Lite will not output video. Now, while the Nintendo Switch Lite won't do video output via USB-C, Nintendo does suggest that if you find the right third-party dongle, you might be able to use it to connect to USB-A peripherals, like some sort of a GameCube controller. That's cool, but that's not really the same thing for me. One interesting thing about the Switch Lite, though, is you can connect other controllers to it. I didn't get a chance to test this, but you could take Joy-Cons or the Switch Pro and connect it to the Switch Lite, but without a kickstand, what are you gonna do? You're gonna have to get some case and prop it up somehow and then play games on its 5.5-inch screen. Now let's get to the size of the Switch Lite. Like, how big is this? I'll tell you to the best of my abilities. I actually held this Switch up to it, and it feels like removing one of the Joy-Cons. It pretty much comes to this length. So it's thinner and it's lighter, but in terms of hand feel, you've got a Switch, remove one of the Joy-Cons and hold it in your hand. That's kind of what you're dealing with. And it's nice because it feels a little less long, but it's not as small as the PlayStation Vita, which it starts to really resemble, because once you've got those controllers and you've got that screen, you're in Vita country. But it feels like something you could probably slip into a jacket pocket. I don't think it would fit into your pocket of your pants unless you have really big pant pockets. And that 5.5-inch screen looks like it has a little bit less bezel, which is good. One little note on the screen, it doesn't have auto display brightness adjustment, which is on the Switch, though I find on mine that kind of gets a little bit over extreme in some instances, and I turn that off. On a 5.5-inch screen, can you make out everything on the games that you would on a normal Switch, which has a 6.2-inch screen? Well, the 4 games that I got to play were Super Mario Odyssey, Zelda Breath of the Wild, Smash Bros. Ultimate, and Mario Kart 8 for about like 20 minutes total. They all looked great on the screen, but the pixels are a little more dense because it's a smaller display. I'm curious about text in particular, whether there'll be any games that suddenly become really too small to read. I already find there are a couple of Switch games out there that are not as great to play on the handheld, and you want to plug them into a TV, which you can't do on the Switch Lite. There are games on the Switch that are not made for handheld mode. Games like 1-2 Switch, remember that one? Or Just Dance. Those games are meant to be docked into a TV. You could use them on the Switch Lite. Again, if you found a way to prop up the Switch Lite and you paired Joy-Con controllers with it, you could play those games, but it wouldn't be ideal. The one set of games that you can't play on the Switch Lite, Nintendo Labo. Nintendo Labo. I like Nintendo Labo. I think it's really cool. Not everybody loves it, but that transforming cardboard stuff, those are really specifically tailored, obviously, to the screen size of the original Switch, and also to the Joy-Cons and how they pair. None of that will translate, so if you're thinking about getting those, get an original Switch. Another thing that was dropped from the Switch Lite that is in the Joy-Cons of the original Switch is the IR camera. The only games I can think of that use that IR camera are the Labo series of games and 1-2 Switch. So maybe it's not such a bad thing to ditch that, but it was a kind of an interesting feature. FYI, both the Switch and the Switch Lite have headphone jacks, but they do not support Bluetooth headphones, which is annoying, but just so you know. Who is the Switch Lite for? It's a good question. I think if you're a hardcore gamer, somebody who really loves docking the Switch, obviously the Switch Lite is not for you. It does seem like a great second Switch, like if you were looking for a Switch for your kids, or if you don't care about connecting to a TV, you just want something that's kind of like the next generation 3DS, well then maybe you want to switch to a Switch Lite. But what do you do if you have two Switches in your house? Would you be able to like keep one in front of your TV and then take the Switch Lite on the road with you? That was a question that I asked to Doug Bowser, Nintendo of America's president. He did say that there's some sort of a solution that's in the works to take experiences with you. More to come. I'm really curious what that is. I don't know if that might mean that finally Nintendo makes it easier to work across multiple devices. I hope so, because otherwise I don't think I would make the switch to the Switch Lite. I wouldn't give up the connection to the TV. I wouldn't give up the modularity and move my library over to a more limited handheld. That's the problem for anyone who already owns a Switch. But again, I don't think the Switch Lite is for current owners of the Switch. I think it's for other people that weren't considering the Switch that might now think of it just for the game library. So hopefully that's helpful. Will Nintendo make a sequel to the fuller featured Switch, the one that's modular? That would be really cool. Nintendo has said nothing about that. I asked about that, and so far, it's all systems go with the older version of the Switch plus the Switch Lite. But you gotta think at some point that's going to happen. If you're interested in that, some sort of really much more advanced Switch, a next step forward, stay put. Get the original Switch, get one that's on sale, stick with the one you've got if you've got one, because the Switch Lite is not that. It seems like one of those things like a lower priced phone, or kind of like Nintendo did with the 3DS to the 2DS to try to create a more budget model. I don't think it's necessarily a bad move. I actually like the way the hardware feels better. I just wish that it was also modular, or at least the thing I really miss is having that ability to do video out, because that would open up so many possibilities to it. But there's not that. So those are my thoughts on the Nintendo Switch Lite after playing it for all of like 20 minutes and getting a chance to talk about it with Nintendo. We'll eventually have one to review somewhere around September 20th. Thanks for watching.